Today on the We Invested podcast, I'm here with David Steele, the founder and CEO of One Wealth Advisors, an RIA located in San Francisco, California, with $1.1 billion worth of assets under management. And he is also the founder and executive chairman of Flower and Water Hospitality Group. David, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me today.
No, thank you so much for inviting us into your beautiful home.
We were
talking a little bit about it before we started recording. This place is amazing, and you're responsible for designing it.
My response, could you ask me that again?
You're responsible for designing this amazing fortress.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the process that went into it?
Oh, yeah. Well, and we were talking about collaboration, right? I mean, I knew I wanted to make Tahoe my primary residence. I'd lived up here part-time for a lot of years, and I had to build a home in this lifetime. I love design. I've been involved in helping design restaurants and apartments and homes before that. I've renovated, but I've never built a ground up home. So this is something, it was one of my life goals to do. And so I spent a couple years designing it and then almost 4 years building it. So it's quite a process.
Absolutely, and it turned out amazing, man. I was just letting you know, this is one of the coolest experiences for me personally, so I appreciate you for the hospitality and welcoming us into your home.
That's my pleasure.
So you're from Philadelphia originally, and Philadelphia has been portrayed in the media as more of a blue-collar industrial city, but looking at your past and looking at the things you've accomplished, I would consider you more of a Renaissance individual. How did you carve out this sort of path for yourself coming from a industrial blue-collar city like Philly?
Well, I mean, I was raised by a single mom, school teacher, divorced parents. My father was also a professor, but he was sort of gone when I was really young. And so I think really, even though you're right, Philly, in that area, I was raised as a kind of a blue-collar area, but I wasn't really raised blue-collar. We had less money than most blue-collar people because it was a single mom teacher salary. But, you know, my parents went to college, and it was assumed I would go to college eventually, and education was something that was prioritized. And so I think that ultimately put me in a path to follow what, you know, it's a little more explainable in that way. And I went to college, got a degree in business, and, you know, the rest is history.
Absolutely. I mean, and what would you say are some lessons or experiences that stuck with you, throughout your life, just growing up in Philly and growing up in that environment?
Well, number one is my mother. I mean, on the good news and bad news, I guess, is my mom raised me to believe, first and foremost, I could do anything I wanted to do, no matter what it was. The negative part of it is she raised me to feel like I was the center of the universe, so I had to overcome some weird narcissism, I suppose, when I was younger over the years. But she modeled for me the importance of relationships, people. Those seeds were planted at a really, really, really young age. I watched her, not just how she treated my brother and I, but myriad friends, her students. It was all about it being in the service of others, and I'll just say it over and over again. That's it. That's all that matters, and that was a lesson that I learned really early.
I had the chance to kind of do some research on you, and I had the chance to look over your website, and there was a quote that resonated with me personally, and that quote was, "Balancing logic and creativity." What does that quote mean to you?
Well, you know, whenever I do any type of business consulting, I talk about the difference between what some people refer to as the scientific process versus the artistic process. And the artistic process, I may be oversimplifying, is the celebration of the variance of results, right? You go to one of my industry's restaurants, or you look at something on the wall. If it's the same, that's not art, right? And so the artistic process is really excited about different results. The scientific process has a complete disdain for the variance of results. And so maybe when I put that on my website, what I was trying to articulate in a simple way is that I think greatness that's sustainable, no matter what it is, I think has a better probability of being great because of the artistic process and staying great because of the scientific process. And so I think there's a greatness in any realm is a healthy tension between those things.
You have so many different creative outlets, from, actually creating art, to being a restaurateur, to owning multiple businesses, some in yoga, fitness, just a wide variety of creativity. Do you have a specific lane that is your favorite, one that you enjoy the most?
No, because I see everything I do as the same. And I know everybody looks at my background and sees me doing all these different things, but for me, I do everything's the same, which is to say, I figure out what I want to do, and I'm able to coalesce partners, teams around that idea. And I then continue to coach those people. And I see each of the businesses that I've created very much not as my business, but our business. And in some instances, I see businesses I've helped create as their business, as my partner's business, and I'm just there to coach them. So I don't have one industry or one business that I'm more passionate about than any other. What I am equally passionate about is working with my business partners and building good organizations.
What inspired you to start One Wealth Advisors? And what problem were you trying to solve when you were initially creating this wealth management firm?
Well, I started the financial planning practice in 1991. So what is that, 34 years ago or something like that? March of 91, so 34 years ago, crazy. I was with a little regional firm. I'd grown up poor, worked in restaurants all through high school and college, wanted to open a restaurant, but didn't think I could make any money doing it. And so I went and became a stockbroker, actually, and was very successful because I was able to be persuasive. I don't know how at 24 years old people were willing to let me invest their money for them. They were, probably shouldn't have been, but wasn't happy being a stockbroker, which is really just a financial salesman of products. I was making money but wasn't happy. I was like, oh, something's going on here. And I didn't feel like I was in the service of others. That was my discovery at about 26, 27 years old. And so I pivoted my career into being what was at the time called fee-based financial advisors, which are, you don't charge a commission for transactions. You're not really selling a product. You're providing, it's much more of a service type business. It pays less, but I was much happier. So I took a 70% pay cut from being a stockbroker to a fee-based financial advisor, but I was much happier. And then I, little by little, sort of one client at a time, built the practice up. My brother had joined me, and we were at a firm called Bear Stearns, which was a wonderful company. And then the credit crisis hit. Bear Stearns was bought by JP Morgan for next to nothing. All of a sudden, I woke up one day, I'm like, oh, I'm an employee of a big bank now. We stayed there for a while, but the real answer to your question is, why did I create One Wealth Advisors? It's because I couldn't stand working for a big bank. I hated it. We were very unhappy. And I had already created my first restaurant. That is to say, I was an entrepreneur. It was very successful. I did it as a side hustle. Didn't know if it would work. It worked really well. So I was like, starting a financial planning company is way easier than creating a restaurant. Why am I working for JP Morgan? And so I convinced my brother and a couple of partners that I had to leave JP Morgan, start our own company, and we took almost every client with us. And so it was an overnight success because I had spent, my brother and I had spent so many years building it sort of the right way. But that was 10 years ago.
You kind of answered a little bit of my next question, but I want to ask, what was that transition like from a big bank, major bank, to creating your own RIA and carving your own path?
One of the greatest, most wonderful experiences of my life.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard things like the death of creativity is the steady paycheck. I mean, no offense to people that have jobs. I employ people. They have steady paychecks. I hope they don't leave me. I hope we create environments for them to feel completely satisfied. But for me, I really didn't realize I was living a life that wasn't authentic to my true self, and my true self is to create my own businesses. And so there was on Game of Thrones, there was a character who was a very empowered person, and this prince in the beginning of the show, forget his name, he ends up becoming like a slave to this other king. Do you remember the guy's name?
Nah, I don't remember his name, but
he gets his, cut off.
Yeah, exactly.
And he became a shell of his former self.
Yeah.
I only realized when I left J.P. Morgan that I was living a black and white life, and all of a sudden my life became colorful the day I left. That's how it felt.
Man, that's incredible. I mean, it's liberation, right?
It's liberating, but well, definitely. I did feel liberated, for sure, and my words just then sort of imply that. But what it felt like was it was inauthentic. I was living unauthentically. I was living inconsistently with my true self, and I then felt like I was living authentically. Even if it hadn't succeeded at all, I suppose, or certainly not as well as it has, I still think it would have been right for me.
How has your vision for One Wealth Advisors evolved since its inception?
Well, I think our vision hasn't evolved technically. My best friend, Frank, who I met when I was 9 years old, is our director of financial planning and investments. He's a CFP wizard kind of a person, but we worked in restaurants together in high school and college, and when he joined us years ago, he said, "Wow, this is just a hospitality company." Meaning we're a financial planning company providing crazy hospitality. It wasn't until we were doing that all along, but I now verbalize that. I don't think that was written into our vision, but I think instinctively that's really what we're doing. We were in the service of our clients, period. That's all we wanted to do, and our vision has not changed. Who our clients are has changed, therefore what it means to be in service maybe has evolved and changed. But at the end of the day, we do not exist without our clients. We exist for our clients.
Growing up, I used to work at Sonic as a car hop, and we would have to run to the cars. I couldn't skate. I never did skate, but I used to run to the cars.
Oh, they had skaters?
Yeah, they had skaters at the Sonic where I'm from. And but the lessons that I learned from just being in that kind of service space, which is not quite a restaurant, it's a little bit different, fast food, but I learned a lot of valuable lessons that I still carry with me today as far as customer service, being thoughtful, being thoughtful with what you're doing for others and how your actions impact others.
I'm going to ask you a question, because I was interviewed recently, and I said this, and I'm going to say it again because I really like it, which is, I think it's binary. You can act like you're hospitable, like you care.
Yeah.
But you may not actually care about the person you're serving. So there's a lot more going on, because I think there are two types of people. People who actually want to be in the service of others, to make others feel good, whatever it may be, the business may be that you're in. And then there's people that don't want to, and they may say and do all the same things. I think the customer feels it. I think they know it. I mean, I don't know you well, but I sense you genuinely wanted to provide service to people. And I'll bet you, as I'm saying this, you worked with people who didn't genuinely want to provide service to people. And when I think about hiring people, that's what I'm on the lookout for. Do they genuinely want to help people?
You can feel energy without even having to say anything. You can feel the energy of someone. I'm a firm believer in that.
I completely, that's what I'm trying to say.
What is your firm's core investment philosophy?
Well, to be blunt, we never sell on performance.
Okay.
We're highly suspicious of, there's a concept in, you know this because of your business, maybe all the listeners don't, there's a concept in the investing world called alpha, which is essentially when you have a strategy and you're trying to beat some type of benchmark, If you're in fact close to the benchmark, actually close to the benchmark in strategy, and you're able to beat the benchmark, you have so-called alpha. We're pretty suspicious of the existence of alpha, but we're pretty sure that many people try to sell on it. So we never lead when we're in a sales process, when we're competing for a client. We never try to compete on investment solutions. We're an open architecture, legal fiduciary, registered investment advisory firm that has access to provide the menu of our investment choices represents almost every investment that exists, almost every investment. I would say the overwhelming majority of our investments we do for our clients are index funds, which is the antithesis of alpha. That is to say, they're low fees, they're just trying to give you the benchmark returns rather than something above the benchmark returns. Now, for our clients that have more substantial portfolios, there are different types of strategies that are not where we think index funds are not appropriate, because there's some more sophisticated tax planning you can do. Minimums for some of the firms that have a better chance of achieving alpha tend to be higher. And so our core philosophy, we start with very generic types of investment choices, and then we have to be proven pretty convincingly that there's a reason to do something otherwise.
Index funds and ETFs have been having great returns for the past few years.
Well, yes, because indexes have had a great return for the past few years.
Yeah. And
the index funds and ETFs that mimic those have returned exactly the same amount minus the little fees they charge. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I mean, but I'm going to push back on that a little bit. Bond index funds and bond indexes haven't done well over the last few years, and nor have international indexes. And small cap indexes, even in the United States, have underperformed. What's done really, really well are large cap, big company, U.S. companies, especially ones that are oriented towards technology, which now, if you look at the S&P 500, it's the biggest asset, it's the biggest industry represented. So what we're really talking about is what's done well over the last few years are large technology companies.
There's a lot of excitement around cryptocurrency right now. Is that a direction that your firm has interest in heading down?
Well, anybody listening to this that's under the age of 50 right now is going to call bullshit on me, but when somebody can actually tell me what the use case is for cryptocurrency outside of criminals and speculating, let me know. Now, I own a little Bitcoin. I don't think it does anything. I bought it and it's appreciated a lot. It feels good when I look at my little Coinbase account. But I don't pretend like it's an investment. It is a speculation, full stop.
We talked about this a little bit earlier before we started recording. You're no stranger to taking risk, and calculated risk is what you mentioned. So is that how you kind of view your cryptocurrency investments, as this is a calculated risk that I want to take, but I want to make sure I'm exposed to it?
Truthfully, I just think the reason I personally bought Bitcoin is FOMO.
Got it.
It's not, there's no really strong investment thesis. We have not recommended to one client that they buy any crypto of any sort, although I bet 40% of our clients own crypto away from us for the same reason that I own crypto away from our core investing we do for me, even my own portfolio personally, which is to say it's FOMO. I mean, if you look up what a Ponzi scheme is, right, a Ponzi scheme requires the next buyer. And if there are no next buyers for crypto, guess what? It goes to zero. There's no fundamental use case for it. I hear this all the time from people that are crypto enthusiasts. Well, investing in stocks is gambling. Listen, these shoes, these jeans, the companies, I bought these from companies. You bought your clothes, you bought that car from a company. That company hopefully generated earnings. The earnings of that company, if you want to own a piece of those earnings, you can buy the stock in that company. So investing in something that builds things, makes things, provides services, has earnings, where you want to buy a piece of those earnings, that is not what we're doing with cryptocurrency. And I realize, again, if you're under 50 and you're listening to this podcast, you're like, this guy doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. But I've had this conversation with lots of crypto enthusiasts, and they still have not been able to convince me otherwise. So
I respect that perspective, and I do like that perspective, and I understand where you're coming from, especially on the utility case for Bitcoin more specifically. I know it's compared to digital gold. I can't really say what gold does at this point outside of wearing it. I do have
it's the only good analogy. The gold is the only good analogy, which is gold doesn't really do anything. And sure, you necklace, whatever. But gold wouldn't be worth anywhere near what it is worth if not for it to be considered a store of value. Who has decided it's a store of value? Society has. Yeah. So I contend that at some point in time, some version of crypto, which by the way is probably superior to gold, because as inefficient as it is to trade crypto, go look at your fees when you buy and sell it. I don't care if it's the cheapest provider, it's still too expensive. It's still more efficient than buying and selling gold, probably. And so it's cool in that regard. So here's my prediction. My prediction is at some point in time, Bitcoin is going to be uninteresting to people who speculate. It will then become interesting to people who see it as a store of value or as a protection against sovereign risk, which is really what when gold does well, it's because there's concerns about sovereign risk. That is, the U.S. dollar is under attack, our balance sheet gets out of whack, or there's World War III happens, et cetera, et cetera. And in that scenario, historically people would buy gold. Right. And I mean, we used to be on the gold standard. Every dollar had $1 worth of gold until Nixon got in office. It's not crazy to think that there'd be a digital currency standard, but guess what? It's not going to be interesting to speculators then. People won't be thinking that they're going to get rich buying it. They're thinking, I'm going to protect value by owning it. That's a very different thing that's happening right now. So I expect that is actually going to happen. Do I think it should have been Bitcoin or crypto? Probably not, but it did. And that's probably what's going to happen.
I just recorded a Crypto for Beginners series earlier today. So I'll let the listeners and the viewers check out my series to understand my thoughts and my perspective on it. But I definitely appreciate your side. Definitely valid points,
Yeah, and if you want to get somebody who's bullish on crypto, probably talk to somebody who's under 50.
Hey, now look,
we're old. I'm an a-traditional guy, by my lifestyle choices, and I got tattoos and all that stuff. So I got cool stuff going on, I guess. But I'm an old man when it comes to the space.
Nah, man, I respect all perspectives for sure. What does an ideal client for One Wealth Advisors look like to you?
Well, it's interesting, and you asked before about our vision for the company. And there's two parts of our vision that came in conflict with each other. I didn't realize this. One was people used to ask what our minimums were, and our answer was nice people. Well, a funny thing happened. It worked. We've grown at somewhere between 15 and 20% every year without trying. We do no marketing, no business development, nothing. And we grow and grow and grow. I woke up one day and saw us have 12 team members and 383 clients, up from 4 team members and 110 clients or whatever it was. And all of a sudden, I realized that if we were going to maintain that philosophy of what's our minimum, nice people, which is a bit of a wise ass, but lovely kind of sentiment, we didn't want to do minimum account sizes, so we put in place a $10,000 a year minimum fee because we didn't want to become a 100-person, 200-person company. We didn't want to become a 2,000, 3,000 client company because there's an intimacy that gets lost between you and your team members, which is impossible at a big company, and an intimacy between all team members and every client, which is something that's really wonderful that I think we still mostly have. And so I was protecting against that. So that's a little bit of an evolution to our original vision, which is, our minimum's nice people. Now it's like we want to really maintain the spirit of what we went into this for.
What do you consider success as the CEO of One Wealth Advisors at this point in your career?
I love that question. Well, my, I'm a big fan of writing life goals, especially, you're much younger than I, we talked about that earlier. I love writing life plans. More than 5 goals, too many. Less than 3, probably too few. But I love writing them, and I love writing them every 5 to 10 years. And then putting them away and ignoring them. And then you wake up 5 years later, look, I did all that stuff. There's some human magic kind of thing happening with that goal setting, for sure. I've achieved everything I want to achieve in this lifetime. I have one goal left, which is, it's like the most luxurious place to be. I'm not the wealthiest person. I still have to work. I can't retire based on my current lifestyle, and I don't want to retire. My only goal left in life personally, and what I define as success personally for myself, is, am I helping the people that I love around me achieve their goals, their life goals? And because everybody around me has yet to achieve all their life goals. So I see that as my last mission for my life. But you asked the question differently about One Wealth Advisors. Well, we crossed $1 billion in assets under management, which we did last July. My team was celebrating. It was, it's sort of an industry marker for a success story. And I listened to them celebrate this team meeting we have weekly with all 12 people, and I let it go on for 5 or 10 minutes, and then I stopped. I said, I just want to remind everybody that we don't celebrate results. We celebrate systematic behavior. When I started building the practice in 1991, I was handed a piece of paper with 500 numbers at the top, 70 numbers 1 through 70 in the middle, and 1 through 10 at the bottom. And I dialed the phone 500 times a day. I wouldn't leave until I hit 500. And I knew then I could talk to 500 people. I would dial 500, I'd talk to 70 people on average, and 10 people would want to hear from me again. Okay, now I had my model, and 10 people would want to hear from me again. I get 1 client from that. So I knew I had a framework for success. I knew I was going to succeed. Every day I celebrated if I got to 500, if I didn't. That was it. And so I reminded everybody that what made us successful is the systematic behavior on the effort, the input, not the output. I don't like celebrating output. I like celebrating input. And you can then therefore be successful pretty much every minute of the day.
What are some of the habits that you focus on now to maintain or continue to expand your current success?
You mean personally or personally? Well, I heard recently, the big one is, and I like this quote, which is, you are your calendar. And related to that is, your calendar doesn't lie. I am really obsessive about managing my own calendar. I probably in a point in my life where I could have, that whole thing where somebody else makes the appointment for you. Oh, Jenny or Jack will find a time for you on my calendar. First of all, no offense to anybody listening that does that, good for you. It comes across a little elitist to me and a little hierarchical, but I digress. There's another thing going on for me which is more important, which is the management of my calendar is critical. So the things that are important to me, they're on the calendar. And the only thing that's important to me, or I will say work isn't the only thing important to me. Taking care of my body, spending time with people I love, making sure, my whole calendar is time blocked every 30 minutes, every day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And I'm not a freak. Well, maybe I'm a freak compared to some people in that regard. But to me, it's the one thing we can all do. And if you really want to see why you are happy with your life or unhappy with your life, it's highly probable the answer lies in your calendar.
That's a really profound response.
Kind of boring though, isn't it? It's kind, or it's simple, I should say.
No, it makes you think. Because you can clearly just look at your surroundings and see that type of lifestyle that you've adopted has paid off.
Well, yeah, I mean, we talked about my house before you walked in. It's an impressive home. I'm very proud of it. I spent a lot of time building it. I look back to that call sheet in 1991, and I don't look at this as success. I look at that as success. And, I went cross-country skiing today with a client of One Wealth, who was a good friend of mine, and that was killing two birds with one stone.
Right.
I was working, I was exercising, and that was very, very successful. And yes, she's a client, and yes, she may refer us to other clients or whatever, but it's the inputs.
In addition to One Wealth, you're also the founder and executive chairman of Flower and Water Hospitality Group. Can you talk a little bit more about that and just let us know what exactly that is in your own words?
Well, yeah, I mean, it started as a restaurant. It started as one restaurant, and Flour and Water is like the ingredients for dough. It was a sort of a gastronomic pizza pasta place. I say gastronomic because it's not just, round table or Pizza Hut. It's a little, there's chefs. It's a little more artisanal. We were talking about that earlier, and I didn't know if it would work or not. And we opened in 2009 in the middle of the credit crisis. And it was a really scary time. The stock market had dropped 50% or more, depending upon the index you're looking at. The banks were failing. It was a very scary time. Certainly, nobody was stupid enough to open a restaurant in 2009. We're smart enough, I suppose. It was hard. I had a very hard time raising money. I had to sell my apartment to put up half the money myself because investors weren't going to give a first-time restaurateur who was doing it part-time to open a restaurant. And it did really, really well. We had lines around the block the day we opened, and 16 years later, we still have lines around the block every day we open. It's pretty crazy. That was the first restaurant. I went to my partners. Again, I was sort of doing both things. I was like 70% time at the financial planning company, and maybe 30% of my time was spending on the restaurant. And I said to my partners, I said, I've watched a lot of our clients of my financial planning company win and lose, succeed and fail. And I think I have learned how to build a company. I said, I think we have a brand and we could build a company. And we have. And so it's a little more complicated structurally in how the organization's run, because there's actually two organizations, but I'll simplify it and say, we have 7 restaurants with 3 more opening over the next 13 months. They're all really successful restaurants by my measure, by most other people's measure. They're cash flow positive. The investors have been treated well. I think they're involved in what I call the conversation of culture. They're additive, I think, to the neighbors and communities that they're in. And we've launched a consumer packaged goods business within the company that we're in 400 grocery stores now with our dried pasta. We're launching frozen pizza in April, and we hope to be in every grocery store in America. So it started as one restaurant. It worked, and we've decided now to scale the company. And I've just got wonderful partners in those businesses that do certainly 99% of the work. And I do a little inspirational coaching type work mostly.
The restaurant industry is an extremely difficult industry to survive in, especially in a competitive market like the Bay Area, where every restaurant is incredible.
Yeah.
How do you prepare yourself mentally to deal with competition at that level inside of having to manage a restaurant and making sure that it's living out and carrying out the vision that you have for it?
Well, first of all, we were talking a little bit about this before the podcast started, but I think the restaurant industry has a reputation for having a high failure rate, and my hypothesis as to why is it's a very romanticized industry, which attracts a lot of people that want to have restaurants, that want to own restaurants, but it also attracts a lot of investors, wealthy people maybe, who have a little bit of excess capital that they are willing to risk. And they may be investing in people who don't have the pragmatic business principles down, frankly. they may have an abstract relationship with capital. They don't understand how to write a business plan or any strategic planning whatsoever. They don't understand how important it is to be patient and have enough working capital that if things don't go well, you can roll up your sleeves, get to work, and it's okay. The treadmill's not, at high speed. It's moving nice and slowly because you've allowed yourself to do that. So I really think that the reason we have been successful in a competitive environment is, I'd like to think what we've created is really good. It's good art, so to speak, but we've been really disciplined also, and I think that's something that distinguishes us from maybe businesses that have been less successful. There's lots of really successful, well-planned businesses in San Francisco, and then there's lots of restaurants that open and close, and they were great. And show me a restaurant that was really, really good that closed, I could probably predict why or analyze or guess why it happened. And there's, again, the operators were not disciplined, they didn't have a good relationship with capital, and they weren't patient.
You wear multiple hats on a daily basis. How do you step back from it all or unwind even?
Well, I never let myself work more than 8 hours. And I talked earlier about managing my calendar. This is our interview right now. It's on my calendar. It's on my calendar from 3:30 to 5 p.m. It's there. And I have friends coming over at 5 p.m. I'm making dinner for them. And so if you're, this whole idea, there's a lot of pushback on this idea of work-life balance right now. Elon Musk talks about, a lot of the whole technorati, that tech bro culture is really, and bankers are very critical of work-life balance. I think it's, show me a business that's dependent upon people working 15-hour days, 7 days a week. I'm not sure that's a business that should exist, by my view. And so I live what I preach, which is I put everything I want on my calendar I want to do, including exercise and spending time with loved ones over meals and a little bit of wine. I meditate every morning for a few minutes, and I was in the hot tub for 15 minutes after I exercised today. It's all on the calendar.
Yeah.
So,
what advice would you give to an entrepreneur that is looking to take a similar path that you did?
Listen, first of all, entrepreneurship is a privileged word right now in our society, at the expense of not being an entrepreneur. Meaning, I think it's almost gotten to the point where anybody who's not an entrepreneur is hierarchically beneath entrepreneurs. And I would like to push back on that. I don't think an entrepreneur is better, more important than a non-entrepreneur. That is a critical team member, non-entrepreneur. I think being an entrepreneur is, somebody has to really do some soul searching to decide if that's their true calling. Are you willing to fail? Are you willing to take a really long time to succeed? There's another problem with our culture, especially in the Bay Area, which is heavily influenced by the venture capital community, which executes something called the power law. When they make investments, they want you to fail fast. Because really, if they have 20 investments in a portfolio, they really only need or want, well, I'm sure they want more, but they certainly only need one monstrous home run. You read about the monstrous home run. You don't read about the other 19 others. There's nobody interested in reading their stories. While at the same time, the world is littered with failed CEOs or entrepreneurs, heavily influenced by their investors, the VC community, to swing for the fences. Because it's in the VC's interests, but the trauma that the entrepreneur experiences can be permanent.
Yeah.
It can never end for them. And so and I am biased, I have never sold a company. I don't ever plan to sell a company. I am trying to be involved in helping multiple organizations be generational, that they're around long after me, which means I'm not trying to sell them, right? I'm not trying to have a quick result. My financial planning company that has a $1.1 billion in assets under management, and it's very, very successful by every external measure. It started in 1991, one client at a time, low and slow. My restaurant company will have 10 restaurants across the two businesses over the next 14 months. The consumer packaged goods business, we started with one restaurant 16 years ago. One business at a time. So if anybody's listening to me, it's slow down. There's a Latin saying, I can't say it in Latin, but it basically is hurry up, slow down, which is a contradiction or an oxymoron seemingly, but I actually think there's an energy to that, which is a good entrepreneur is agitated internally. They really want to succeed. But my kind of entrepreneur is also patient at the same time.
David, thank you so much for your time today, man. This was a really insightful and profound conversation for me personally. And this entire experience has just been motivational, man. So thank you for your time today. I really appreciated this conversation.
It's my pleasure, and I'm very optimistic for your future after the conversations we had before the podcast started. So I'm excited to see what happens with your life.
Thank you, David. Hey, man, and that's a wrap. Yeah, that was awesome, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Thank you so much. That was incredible.